Hey, Mike, good morning.
Good morning.
This is really cool spending time with you here. I was going to ask you, can you tell us or tell me, talk a little bit about crisis case management, the company, when you founded it, and what the goal was when you guys came together to found crisis case management?
So actually about 29 years ago to the day, my journey in recovery began in sobriety. And actually yesterday was the...
Happy birthday.
Yeah. Wow. And I learned really early on, and people told me that I was uniquely qualified to help other addicts and alcoholics and people that had gone through, there wasn't a lot of spaces where being a degenerate, addict, alcoholic was really valuable, right? And right out of the gate, I started working in what I always thought was in the field of recovery, but as I now realize, you and I, we work in the disease primarily of addiction. And the old-fashioned, I worked as a tech in a detox, in the Ramsey County detox in Minnesota. I worked as a tech in a halfway house and had an opportunity at a couple of years of sobriety to get trained to do interventions. And I was trained by a guy who was trained by a guy. The guy was James Fearing, who you remember.
Yeah.
And this is pre-internet, and if folks called treatment centers gave out a couple of names, and that was a business, right? You could, I used to do, working for this organization, 6, 7, 8 interventions a month.
Wow.
Flying around the country, flying around the world, for years, just doing intervention after intervention, and it was amazing. Back then, and still to this day, it was hard work, but I didn't really feel like I was working. I felt like it was a gift to get to do that. And after about 6, 7 years, I realized in February, I would get a phone call, and I didn't necessarily remember the family that was calling me from December or January, right, because I had been working with 6, 7, 8 other families. And I realized that there was something wrong with the way that I was doing the work that didn't sit well with me, that it was like the intervention was an event. It wasn't a part of the journey. It wasn't a part of the process. It was the process. And I decided to go off on my own, start crisis case management, based on the idea of really diving in deeply with families and working long term to, instead of working with more families, less families, longer periods of time. And that's where it began. And instead of it being phone call on Wednesday, pre-intervention on Friday, intervention Saturday, person's in treatment Saturday night, Sunday, off to something else, I started working with families 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, years, and that's how it began.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
What a journey in 29 years of continuous sobriety, and
yeah.
We know each other a long time. I know a lot about your history, and I've watched crisis case management develop into what it is today, both here in Florida, East Coast, West Coast, and all throughout the country.
Yeah.
And you guys do tremendous work.
Thank you.
Realizing that it is a process, not an event, and it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yep.
To help clients and their families, and the fact that you're staying with families long term and helping them heal through that process.
Yeah.
Can you describe a little bit about what the team does, what crisis case management does to work with the family, what that looks like for that period of time? Because I know I've witnessed you working with celebrities and athletes and actors and musicians, and you're with those people and their families for a long time, helping them through that process.
So typically we'll get a phone call. It's always the level of acuity or severity of the addiction or mental health disorder. People don't call us when it's even a simple alcoholic addict with anxiety. Typically it's a very significant level of acuity, and we will assess the situation, do a full assessment of the family, of the needs. And I learned early on that an intervention, whatever the intervention is, without a solution, is typically a family fight, right? So the most important thing is, what is the solution? What is the path forward? And also making sure that the family system is prepared to participate, right? So if a family calls us to, like a magic bullet to come in and solve their problem for them, we give the family the tools, we teach them, we give them the education, but oftentimes we have to turn down families that are not willing to participate. So, usually ends up with a solution. We get the identified patient into treatment, but we wrap clinicians around the family members, in which, by the way, a family member can be a mother, father, sister, brother, husband, wife, but it also can be a business manager, a sports agent, fiduciary or trustee of a trust. And we work with the clinical treatment team while the identified patient's in treatment, during and after. So a lot of times family members go into treatment, they don't sign releases, and then families, they get their family member back 30 days later, and they're like, we're all good. When we are working with the family, we are there for the whole process, talking to the treatment team. So when they say go to meetings, 12-step meetings every day, go to intensive outpatient, do TMS, do EMDR, and do different protocols and different things, we're with the family the whole way, holding their hands as well as the identified patient. And then after the inpatient treatment, if it is inpatient treatment, we will do recovery coaching or companions, or put in layers of accountability, right? So, nowadays we have SoberLink for alcohol-related sobriety, drug testing, monitoring, and because one thing we've all learned is that the greater the accountability, the greater chance we have for success. And we've had families that I had one family that I worked with for many more than 10 years, through relapse and recovery, marriages, divorces, babies, and sitting here today, that same family that for a decade it was really touch and go, but when you look at a lifetime, the primary individual in this family, the identified patient, is now many years sober, with teenage children and a beautiful life. So if a family wants us and needs us, we will be there as a backdrop to support them, as long as they will work with us.
So what you've done, essentially, if I hear you correctly, is you've taken the model that we know has worked for physicians' health programs,
Exactly.
airline pilots,
Exactly.
and you've created that same type of system where you're able to help monitor that person. Physicians and pilots have a major, they'll lose their license. They'll lose their license to practice medicine or fly jets if they don't follow through. And what you guys have done is built a model where you have that same sort of impact and have the family involved, so that the person who's struggling with the disease of addiction, whose brain may be compromised and not able to make good decisions for themselves, they've got this family that's been educated and trained by the crisis case management team to help accompany them, and this is the way this is going to work, and how we're going to help your loved one manage their disease for the rest of their life, hopefully.
Exactly. Yeah. We for me, it was anecdotal and watching and through my life, not necessarily studying pilots and docs, but realizing that over here, we have these abysmal, horrible recovery statistics at times. And as you said, with doctors and impaired physicians, impaired airline personnel, pilots, that their recovery and their abstinence rates are so high, and then it was really simple. It was like, it seemed crazy, but seeing a doctor, I remember meeting a doctor that was in his 5th year of daily monitored 12-step meetings in his 5th year, right? So not 90 meetings in 90 days. We're talking about thousands of meetings in thousands of days. But the reality is that he was well. He was well, and he was 1,500 and 1,500. It sounds insane.
Yeah.
I actually had a good friend in Boston who had monitored meetings for 3 years daily, right? And a recovery program, and it kept him out of jail, and so when we utilize those tools of accountability that work, we're able to help our families get better results.
It just makes perfect sense, because if we're talking about managing a chronic, progressive, often fatal illness, that if it's not managed on a daily basis, it is the possibility of loss of life. And so having the ability to create something like physicians do when they're managing chronic progressive illnesses, but your team, crisis case management, steps in, educates the family along those lines, and the patient as well, and that whole system, as you said, the agent, the financial advisor, the whole team of people that are involved in this person's life need to be aware and on board and involved, so as not to be part of the problem, but always part of the solution.
Yep.
And you yourself, you mentioned early on that yesterday was your 29-year AA anniversary or sober date, and you have an incredible story. You really do, and you're still doing the same things. To quote our friend Jules, still doing the same thing that you did the first 60, 90 days in recovery, because I know that you go to meetings. I know that you talk about that a little bit, about how you don't have anybody, there's no leverage on you. So what do you do?
So I learned early on by working in the field of mental health, the field of disease, in clinical settings, just like in recovery, I saw people that had sobriety and wellness that I looked up to. And clinically, I saw people that had lives or ways of living that didn't seem that appealing, right? Like basically, ungrateful, not grumpy, not living. Like I didn't get this gift of sobriety to be miserable, right? And when I was in inpatient treatment, I would look around, and for me, it was not the first, second, third, fourth treatment. I'd been many times, right? And the last time, I did what I hadn't done before, which was I listened to people, right? And I followed direction. And really early on, when looking around, not only in recovery, but also in clinically, and I do have a master's in counseling psychology now, and I am a clinician. some people think or take the work that we do as like it's their recovery. Mm-hmm. And to me, it's a bonus. You know, it's helpful to see people, getting well, getting sick. We see people dying all the time, and there's value in thinking, okay, I don't want that, right? But I learned early on that the way that I maintain, when I was drinking and using, my happiness was at about a 2, right? But for the last 29 years, my level is probably like a solid 8, right? And that is by maintaining 12-step recovery, having men in my life around me like you that I trust, can share things that I can look up to as fathers and sons. Rarely do you call me without asking me about my parents who have been dealing with aging and the things that happen in life, or asking about my kids, and also just having fun, right? Like one of the big misconceptions, and I hear it all the time, is people just think that they get sober or they get clean and it's like the fun is over, and the reality is it's just beginning, right? And I just don't want to lose it. I don't want to give it up. And so I do the things. I go to meetings. I try to take care of myself. I try to sleep well, to do all the things. And there have been times that have been real difficult in recovery. And I've had to dive deeper, into trauma work, into intensives, and do other things that folks have told me to do. And so, I look up to you, and I know what you do on a daily basis, and that's what I want.
Thank you. Likewise. And the other thing is you give back a lot. You're of service to others, and I see that, and you do it quietly and don't boast about it. And, we know that there's 2 kinds of people in this world, those that are humble and those that are about to be. And I find you to be a very humble guy doing service work in the community, and I'd love to see that. When you see a program like Prospect Hill and St. Croix in the beautiful U.S. Virgin Islands, and you've been to the facility, and it's a small number of patients we treat there, 7 patients at a time. When you're working with a program like that, I think this is the kind of client that needs to go there. Can you talk a little bit about the people that because I know you choose when you're helping families decide, what do you look for in a quality program like Prospect Hill? What are the things that you're...
I'm actually super glad that you brought Prospect Hill up, because the road, while we have more and more treatment centers, from 20, 30 years ago, and for you throughout your career, it seems like we have thousands of options for people, right? But really the road of good quality mental health and substance abuse treatment has gotten smaller and smaller. Mm. So there are fewer and fewer privately owned facilities like Prospect Hill that have the ability to work with families, work with identified patients in a way that's really bespoke, is thrown around a lot, but it's true. Like, to really meet the individual where they are, to do it in a truly confidential, anonymous manner, that is becoming more and more difficult, certainly in stateside programs, right?
So curating the care for the individual instead of saying, this is our program, this is where you're going to fit in, this is exactly how you do it, because everybody else is doing it.
When you have 50 beds, 80 beds, 142 beds, and you have, alcohol, dual addicted, alcoholic, anxious alcoholic, trauma, PTSD alcoholic, boom, it's like stamp.
Yeah.
And Prospect Hill, and from my experience working with the team there, they're able to meet the family and the client exactly where they are. And as a referent, we also have the ability to make an impact that our voice matters, right? We're able to communicate with them and let them know, okay, this is valuable information that could be helpful for their treatment, right? But to have the benefit of high level of excellence clinically in a peer-based environment, but we're not talking about a football team.
Right.
We're talking about a basketball team.
Exactly. A handful of people where crisis case management comes in and joins that team becomes part of that team with the patient, guiding them through their process, patient and their family. It's pretty special.
Yeah, and whether somebody's a celebrity or in high profile or not, most people don't want their personal business to be, out on the street, and the level of confidentiality and anonymity that Prospect Hill is able to give families is really it's tough to beat.
Yeah.
It's tough to beat.
We're proud of that. It's been a pretty cool experience to have people, of fame and fortune coming there and not having it hit the tabloids ever, not even a chance, because no one knows they're there.
By the way, you don't have to get well in a dump. It's okay for your loved one to get well in a place that they wake up and they look out. And I've woken up at Prospect Hill, and you wake up feeling good, right? It's hard enough. It's hard enough dealing with getting off of the physical addiction to alcohol and drugs, but to be able to give your loved one the benefit of being able to wake up in an environment that's also feels safe and comforting, and where you feel loved, and it's hard not to, when being at Prospect Hill, it's hard not to sort of wake up and think, wow, maybe there is hope here.
Yeah.
Maybe life is going to be okay for me,
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm going to hit you with some questions that are pretty emotive. So hopefully we'll get a tear or two out of you while we're doing this. What gives you hope even after seeing so many difficult and heartbreaking situations?
Every now and then I get a call or text message from a family member. I got one about a month ago from a gentleman who I intervened on him and his brother. And this individual sent me a text saying, thank you. I celebrated 15 years of continuous sobriety. And I learned early on, if I get to help one person, my life is successful, that I've been a success. And I know that even in the families, and I've gotten many calls or texts that are not so wonderful, and we've had tragedies, and I've seen folks, especially in the past 5 to 10 years with the introduction of fentanyl, a lot of death with young people. Mm-hmm. But even some of those, the family members have contacted us and said, thank you. Thank you for being there. Thank you for giving us the direction. And as you mentioned earlier, like families, thank you for showing us to enable the wellness of our loved one and not enabling their sickness, so that if and when a tragedy comes, they know that they were part of the help and not hurting.
That is a special thing, receiving those messages and those calls all throughout the years. Tell me about how you handle a situation where the person that you're trying to help flat out refuses treatment, says, I'm not going.
So we always have to assume that no is going to be the answer. And we have a life raft full of people coming to help the individual that always, even yes, is always preceded by no, typically, right? So our job is to support the family into what does your life look like with this individual, with your father, husband, son, if and when they say no. How do you support their wellness and not support their disease? You know, with parents, it's often easier because there's often finances and you know, an apartment or a bedroom in the basement or the most important part of the intervention is it's easy when they say yes. It's, you know, how do we have a successful intervention even though we got to know? And that's all boundaries and a plan.
Having that whole plan laid out ahead of time with the family and loved ones and everybody involved, and
Right.
working through that ahead of time.
Yeah, like, I love you. I want to spend as a wife or husband, I want to spend my life with you. I want to grow old with you. But if you're not willing to take part in this process today, I need to change the way that I respond to your drinking. Yes, you get to choose to drink yourself to death, but I, as your family member, also get to choose. I get choices. You know, I don't have to live. It's not fair for me to live like this. Whatever that looks like.
It's not okay for you to be a cannibal.
Exactly.
I know how to catch you with that one. Can you share a moment during an intervention that hit you the hardest emotionally? There's been so many years and so many situations.
I think for me, I lost, my brother died when I was 22 from his addiction. So for me, when siblings intervene on their siblings, it always really, really hits me hard. I mean, I don't have a choice but to sort of clinically try to remove myself emotionally, I think of myself as sort of like sitting just a little bit outside of myself, because otherwise it would be impossible. But because we didn't have the tools, I wasn't able and wasn't capable of intervening on my brother. And so regardless of the outcome, when I see siblings, and I think of everyone in the same way, siblings, loved ones, having the opportunity is always, I feel like the luckiest person on the earth to get to watch family members offer their loved ones help, knowing that it's so hard. It's like it may be the most painful, excruciating day of their lives. But I realize that, you know what, this person will never be able to take away the fact, no matter what happens, that they said, please get help. Mm-hmm. I love you. I don't want you to die. And I did an intervention one time. I'm not exaggerating. I think it was 8 sisters intervening on their one brother. Okay. It might have been 10, but I don't want to exaggerate, but it wasn't less than 8. And watching these, first of all, it was such a, you know, incredible family that they, you know, had all these kids and all these beautiful women and this young man who was struggling, and to see one after the other, this family not begging, but asking their brother to get help. But there's been hundreds of these situations, and regardless of the outcome, for me, it's always a beautiful experience. Even if I'm getting assaulted, kicked, punched, shot at, it's always threatened, always threatened. Someone screaming, where the mouth foaming,
right.
Screaming an inch from my face.
Yeah, you come into my house. And you do this.
To me, it's always a beautiful process.
I almost think that we ought to teach young adults in school or teenagers about intervention and about what happens, because I think the biggest failure is there's no such thing as a bad intervention. No intervention is a bad intervention.
Exactly.
And so many people come back later and say, I wish I would have done something when I had the opportunity, because I saw this going on. And it's really hard. People don't know what to do. They have that fear of, I'm going to say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. My
mom used to half joke about the fact that she remembers my first intervention. I was 4 years old in Stop and Shop in downtown Boston, and this 8-year-old boy was beating up his 6-year-old sibling, and I went over and to talk to him and tell him to stop. And she always says that was my first intervention. And the process of intervention it's not a magic bullet, but it's beautiful, and it's something that we have also evolved clinically for those of us that have stayed in it, to make the process less traumatic, less frightening, not damaging, but a beautiful doorway to wellness.
Like surgery without a knife.
Yeah.
What's the moment you knew someone was about to die if you didn't step in? And what happened next?
It happens all the time when we see folks that they've convinced themselves that they're just doing what they want to do with their lives, i.e. drink themselves around the clock and use drugs, and nowadays, whenever someone decides to stay in the game of still using drugs, especially with alcohol, many folks can maintain a long, unhealthy, miserable life. But when I see folks too sick to respond to boundaries to get help, or they have too much money, or they consider their family and loved ones replaceable because of finances, I always assume that the end is unfortunately near. Because
we've seen that, haven't we?
Yeah, I mean, it's also it's very unusual for folks to be using heroin, cocaine, anything that is not also laced tremendously with synthetic drugs that are so deadly. Not that they aren't deadly enough as they are, but
worse and worse.
Yeah.
We were talking about that last night, about the gas stations that have these huge kratom containers and cases, vitrinas, beautiful, displaying their kratom, and how crazy that is down here.
The accessibility of substances is so great and so easy. and so available. It is scary. And as a parent, it's very scary.
What's the one thing that you would never say to someone in active addiction? You're trying to help them. Go to treatment in Malibu?
Yeah, go to Passages. What is the one thing?
It's like
I would never say to somebody that it's okay to do what you're doing, because it's not okay. It's not okay you don't live in a vacuum. Very few of us, and if they do live in a vacuum, it's only because their addiction has progressed so greatly that nobody is able to tolerate them. But I don't think it's okay to live that way. The damage and the suffering that is caused by active addiction is too great. It destroys one person's alcoholism addiction can destroy dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of people, and just hurt them. And it's like a cancer in the family system. It is a cancer in the family system.
What's something you wish every parent knew before their kid, that the parent knew before their kid ever touched a drug? What's something that you would...
I wish that more parents and family members realized their strength and power and their ability to stand up to active using and drinking and drug use. That I think that there's still a belief that often if my teenager is drinking and using drugs in the house, it's okay. And it's better than them being on the streets. And I don't know what the age is, but if a child maintains abstinence until
25.
a certain age, right there, but even younger, if it maintains abstinence 13, 14, 15, statistically the rates of alcoholism, are so much better, right? And so often family members, I mean, I hear the wildest things, like my kids' friends came over and they're doing mushrooms. They're 15, 14 years old. They're just bouncing around on the trampoline. It's okay. And that, once again, it's not okay. And that especially until your child is 18 years old, you have a voice and you can control what happens in your household. And I think that families often think because their son is 5'10", that means they're a man.
Yeah.
Or their daughter has reached a certain age that you do have an ability to impact what they do and don't do.
Exert your authority and help them
while
make
you can
better decisions, because we know that the human brain, develops until the age of 25, I think, in males, and a little younger in females. And any chemical that you're inducing into your body before those ages is altering.
I think the male brain starts growing at 25, maybe 45. It starts to settle in at 45. But it's incredible how families just think that they have no voice and no say, but they have so much.
Yeah. How big is the crisis case management team now? How many people are on the team between Florida, California, and across the country?
Probably around 20.
Yeah.
It's around 20, and most of our folks are employees, not contractors, of crisis case management. So we have most of our infrastructures in California, operations and the admissions and all that stuff. And we try to, as much as possible, with utilizing our folks that we know, that we trust, that we feel safe with, that we know are trained and appropriate to work with other families. There's been times when we've worked with, in a year, this over 100 contractors, but we've really tried to bring everybody in-house to and keep them busy, case managing families and intervening and companioning and doing all that.
It's pretty cool. It's a good way to have a solid team, is keeping everybody involved. And you and I have worked on a lot of, I was thinking as you were talking, and it was some of the things that you were sharing were striking a chord of memory of very specific cases that we worked on together, and going way back, and then even more as recent as a year ago, your partner Mike Burba and Alexis Haynes on your team, we working on a case together in Europe, and they did just such a phenomenal job helping this family that had been through such tragedy and trauma and just wild stuff with drug-induced psychosis. And they stepped in and handled it like it was a piece of cake, like nothing.
Yeah.
And I couldn't wrap my head around how they did that so quickly. And so it's just the experience that you guys have had where there's, it's almost like we've seen everything at this point.
Yep.
So keep up the great work.
Thank you, pal.
Thank you.